welcome back to Retro Wrestling Games Presents. I'm your host, Alex G, and with me, as always, is Matt Riley. What's going on tonight, Matt?
Oh, not too much. Just thinking of Eddie Van Halen, man.
Rest in peace, brother. On this episode, we're going to talk about Jesse Ventura's Wrestling Superstars for the Sega Genesis. But before we're going to talk about the game, I'm going to tell you guys a little story. So sometime in the summer of 1990, Jesse Ventura gets a phone call from his agent, which I assume was Barry Bloom. Obviously, the WWF at the time had a deal with LJN/Acclaim to put out their wrestling video games. And at this point, they're only on Nintendo. That would change about the next 2 years when they finally get a Genesis game, and that would be Super WrestleMania. So at that point, Vince says, if you take this deal, I'm going to terminate your contract. So Jesse goes home and thinks about it. He calls up Barry Bloom. He tells Barry Bloom, make the deal. Then he goes to Vince, and he tells Vince, I'm taking the deal, and do what you got to do. At that point, Vince terminates his contract, and he was replaced by Roddy Piper. That's the prologue of this game. So Jesse the Body Ventura's Wrestling Superstars was developed by Human, the makers of Fire Pro Wrestling, and not published by DreamWorks. This game ended up never being released. Its planned release date was July 1991. It got pushed back to May of 1992, but this particular game was not released. Now, the Japanese equivalent of this game, which was Thunder Pro Wrestling Resudon, did end up getting released in 1992, about a month and a half after Super WrestleMania for the Sega Genesis. DreamWorks was a small video game company based out of Minneapolis. And guys, it's not that DreamWorks. It's not like the animated film DreamWorks. They would go on to make video games themselves. This is not them. DreamWorks put out Japanese budget titles over here in the United States. So they had games like Wings of War, which is W-O-R, by the way, not W-A-R, but W-O-R, Wings of War. They released that game. And they released another game called Shove It, which is a puzzle game where you are a lowly warehouse worker moving boxes to earn money to support your gold-digging girlfriend. That's the game. So DreamWorks were only released about 5 games. This game would have been the 6th, but this game was never released. My initial assumption was that this game wasn't released because I thought maybe the contract for Jesse's likeness and name had run out. But I think it's safe to say that this company just went out of business and never got this game out. So that's DreamWorks. So it's not that DreamWorks, guys. It's a different DreamWorks entirely. The thing about DreamWorks, it's such a small company, and it brings up the point about how, Sega in general treated their licensees. Now, for those of you who don't know, Nintendo, when the NES came out, they were very strict on how many games publishers can make. A lot of companies chose to make subsidiary companies. That's where you have Acclaim and LJN. And the reason Nintendo did that is because, in the video game crash of 1983, there was a glut of video games on the market. So Atari basically let anyone make games for their consoles. The Purina Dog Chow game that I guess came in packages of dog food, which is ridiculous.
But is it a good game?
No, it's shit. And that's when you had like the porno games too, which is Beat 'em and Eat 'em is my favorite, by the way.
Oh, no.
So you had all these video games on toy shelves. You had all these video games on retail shelves. You had all these consoles on shelves. And by the time the NES came out, toy retailers and retailers in general were very skeptical. And there was a big stigma against video games to the point where Nintendo had to market the NES not as a video game console, but as a toy. That's why they included Rob the Robot and the light gun and what have you. But one of those big things that they learned from Atari is that they have to be strict on who they license games to. So eventually I ended up with a big lawsuit with Atari/Tengen. Sega trying to take advantage of this and trying to, claw market share away from Nintendo really made it really, really easy for video game publishers to make games for the Sega Genesis. So that's why you see companies like DreamWorks that we have here, which is relatively small for a video game publisher, being able to make games for the Sega Genesis. Okay, so Jesse Ventura's Wrestling Superstars. Now, this game is not finished. A couple of years ago, the ROM surfaced online, and people were able to play it. it's hard to review a game that's not done, and we're going to review Thunder Pro Wrestling Ressued in a later episode. The copy that I have, which I assume is the copy that everyone else has. The music is good. The graphics, it's basically Fire Pro graphics, which is fine. The grapple animation is not complete. There are no submissions in this game. You only have 3 moves for your wrestlers, for each wrestler that you play as. You're unable to go off the top rope, yet the computer can. So the game is not done. So again, it's very hard to review it. We'll give it a full review once we do Thunder Pro Wrestling Ressued in a later episode. You'll notice on the bottom of the screen there's going to be, which I thought at the time were life bars, but they're not life bars. Those are power move bars. So much like some of the other Japanese wrestling games that have the power ball system where you can hit like a super maneuver that gives the opponent a lot of damage, you'll have 3 of these and they do refill. Unfortunately, in this game, they don't refill. They don't do anything. There's no super moves in it. And I thought there were life bars. They weren't going down. It was weird. Overall, the gameplay is what you expect from a Fire Pro game, just without all the bells and whistles. The graphics are Fire Pro graphics. And again, not the greatest. Not for nothing, to be completely honest. They're going to release this in 1991. It's going to look very outdated. Now, if this game would have came out a year earlier, perhaps as a Genesis launch title, it probably would have fit in a lot better, especially what Genesis was doing at the time with your Tommy Lasorda's baseball and your Joe Montana football and your Pat Riley basketball. It would have fit in along those lines. Now, for some reason, Genesis never had a wrestling game at launch, although they had one ready to go in Wrestle War, which was only released in Europe and Japan, but never released in the United States for whatever reason. We did get an arcade version of that game, I believe, in 1988. Sega had a wrestling game, but they didn't do anything with it. And, not for nothing, they could have put something together here where they could have got a wrestler's, likeness and name to get attached to Wrestle War to fit in with the rest of their Sega sports deal, but they didn't go in that direction for whatever reason. What we have here is essentially an unfinished Fire Pro clone by the developer Human. Now, Human's lineage with wrestling games date back to the original black box pro wrestling Nintendo game. So the guy who made that went on to go to Human and make Fire Pro. So there's a direct lineage from pro wrestling on the NES to your Fire Pro wrestling world at this point, which is cool. And Human's a good company. They went out of business and they became Spike later on down the road, but I think overall the game play itself it's Fire Pro. So nothing really to say about that. The music is actually surprisingly good. I do enjoy the music in the game. I didn't get as far as I'd like to, just due to the fact that it got super hard as you got through it. I couldn't get past a certain guy, which happens in a lot of wrestling games. Again, I didn't see if there was an ending screen or maybe it's just a championship screen when you hold the belts, but based on the rest of the designs for this game, I don't think that was a thing. So overall, when it comes to this game, it's a curiosity more than anything else. It's interesting. I'm very fortunate that I got this actually on a cartridge. So we had this guy on eBay who was able to take unreleased ROMs and put them on cartridges. So I do have a physical copy of this game, which is cool. But if you're interested in playing this game, you can find it online relatively easy. Go to wherever you pick up your video game ROMs.
Hold on. You got a physical copy of this game?
Yeah.
Does that mean Vince McMahon's going to come to your house and be like, you owe me $30 for this?
He might. Not for nothing, DreamWorks is based out of Minneapolis. I'm surprised this is not the Greg Gagne game.
Maybe that'll be on Earth in like 20 years.
No, it was 1990. I mean, yes, AWA is on his last legs and stuff, but this very easily could have been, Greg Gagne's Wrestling Superstars.
It's just Greg Gagne like training by opening a jar of mayonnaise. Like, keep going, you're almost there.
You would have had such wrestling luminaries as the Patriot and Flapjack Scott Norton.
But zoom off.
But zoom off.
After hours, $1. Oh no.
This does bring up, a much larger issue that we find in the world of professional wrestling today. Is that, professional wrestlers are not considered employees by the companies that they work for. Well, they're independent contractors. We've been seeing this a lot lately when it comes to wrestlers who are on Twitch or on YouTube that have podcasts, they're on Cameo. And it seems like now the WWE, it either wants them to shut down or they want a percentage of whatever money they make. So, Matt, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, the first question you would say, okay, did you provide my equipment? You know, am I doing this on my own to benefit myself? Yeah. And we talked to the pre-show about how, well, okay, it's a mutually beneficial thing where I, as the performer, am doing extra work to put money in my pocket that you're not providing me. But in turn, I'm creating more fans to watch the product you provide. I think the argument they're making that, well, you wouldn't have a fan base if it wasn't for us isn't entirely true because I, I watch wrestling and I don't watch their Twitch shows, so it's not necessarily, automatic watch. And I do feel that doing this, Andrew Yang, the guy who ran for president, he's done a lot of footwork on this about unionizing and not being independent contractors. And of course, there was the John Oliver piece about this where he talked about, you don't have a plumber who's an independent contractor, you go to the plumber. And why are they able to do these things? And I do think it's coming to like, a boil. It's going to hit a point where it gets legal action. And I don't know if it's going to end up being the thing that's, sparks the unionization of wrestling or that kind of thing, opportunity. But I do think it's going to really change the way that performers are paid because what they're doing is basically going, well, yeah, we're a little bit different. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Now, Jesse Ventura is just one example of many. You mentioned earlier some guys before him had some problems as well.
Yeah, there's been issues with wrestlers doing stuff outside the WWF, in the past. You can go as early as you can start with Hulk Hogan, in 1981, 1982, around the time that he was scheduled to film Rocky III. There's a famous conversation with him and Vince Sr. where he says, "Well, Terry, you're not an actor, you're a wrestler, and you don't go to the town that I need you, and I'm gonna have to fire you." And then Hulk Hogan goes on to star, and Rocky III becomes a big star, and Hulkamania is born, and eventually he's the biggest star of the promotion when he comes back from the AWA. We've seen it with Sergeant Slaughter, who went out and made a deal with G.I. Joe, and the WWF wasn't necessarily happy with that. You can go back and look at Bundy and his ad campaign with like Tandy Computers, I think it was. You can look at poor Orndorff and his sports cream that he had.
I don't remember.
There's been instances of this in the past, and the WWE has always been a stickler for doing things outside their purview, outside of their control. The WWE always wants to be able to control their talent. And I think it goes back to having the wrestler need them more than they need the wrestler. It gives them a very dubious negotiation position
Right.
when you're talking about contracts moving forward. And I think the modern issue, because we talked about back in the day, but the modern issue is that they let The Rock go do these things, and now The Rock is the biggest star on the planet.
Right.
And the WWE had missed out on 10 years of pretty substantial business. If Rock had stayed full time in the WWE, from when he left, I guess he left around 2002, 2003. He'd probably be still wrestling to this day. And I think they missed out on a lot of substantial business. And I think we can't let that happen again. You've seen it happen with Cena recently, where now he's doing, he's in the Suicide Squad movie. I think he has a TV show coming up as well. Right. So we don't have him under control anymore, and I think it worries these guys. We just see Sasha Banks is going to be in The Mandalorian, and I know Becky Lynch has projects in the works too. And the WWF used to always do this thing in the early '90s where wrestling was a stepping stone to something greater. Oh, I'm going to do wrestling and become a NASCAR driver. I'm going to do wrestling and I'm going to be big in Nashville. And we kind of see that actually happening now, where these guys are becoming big stars in whatever medium they come from. And the WWE is kind of scared now because now they're losing potential talent that they invested a lot of money in, and that they need them at these shows. They need them on TV. They don't need them acting someplace else. So I can see where the worry for the WWE comes in.
I can get that, but I also feel, we've talked about before, is that it's a double-edged sword in a way, but also you benefit. If you create a star who has a hit series, and does a good job, they come back with that extra attention. And I think we always talk about this.
And you can say this for The Rock too. And a lot of people talk about how WWE especially is more mainstream now. They're getting covered by ESPN and they're getting covered by Sports Illustrated. I don't think a lot of that happens if it wasn't for The Rock becoming the star that he becomes. Wrestling became more acceptable, in my opinion, because of The Rock.
Sure. I just feel that overall, if you create these movie stars, you're going to create more eyes. And one of the things we talk about all the time on these shows is wrestling's number one problem is creating new fans. They don't do a good job of drawing in new fans. I always call it the girlfriend test, like or I guess boyfriend test. But you're sitting there on the couch with her and you're watching a show and you kind of explain to her what this is, and if she watches it for 5 minutes and goes, "This is stupid," whereas if you have an engaging character that comes out and like just grabs your attention, focus, right? I always feel that like look what Sasha Banks doing with The Mandalorian. That's fantastic. I mean, I'll watch it anyways, but it also helps me to get a greater appreciation of that wrestler. And when we're looking at these people who are doing these things on Twitch and Cameo and all these other ways to make extra money, I guess the way I'm hearing it, probably better than I do, but the way I'm hearing it is they're going to take the proceeds from that and then give the wrestler a cut of it. Is that not just like a super like hustler mafia move?
From my understanding of this, again, it's not like I have contracts in front of me or whatever. They're going to dissolve their own contracts. So they're going to give them all new contracts with this provision in it that anything they do, from what I understand, they will get a percentage of what they do on Twitch. So it might be like 10% or 20% or anything like something like that. Something really low, and most of it goes to the WWE.
What a scam!
It's in bad form, especially with with social media and all that other shit right now. And the wrestlers not afraid to talk. Like they go out there and they talk all the time. They're on these podcasts. They're out there, and some of them may not be afraid of the heat, but it's like,
how long has it been like battling negative perception? For various things. And then remember about, what was it, 2 years ago, they came out, we're going to listen to you. You're the boss. You're in charge. And then nothing changed.
Between this and the stuff that happened in Saudi Arabia when they're on the plane and people are like, I don't know if I'm going to die. I'm exaggerating, but a lot of people were worried that when they were stuck on the tarmac in Saudi Arabia. I don't think the negative press necessarily bothers them all that much. They've never really cared. Whether it be from the Ring Boy scandal, the steroid scandals, nothing's really, nothing's killed them. Now, it may have hurt them. Obviously, the steroid scandal hurt them, and the Ring Boy scandal hurt them, and the Iraqi sympathizer angle hurt them. But nothing has killed them. You had all the premature deaths of wrestlers. That didn't destroy the WWE. If Chris Benoit, when that stuff went down, if that didn't kill the WWE, they don't give a shit about some wrestlers complaining that they got their Twitch taken away.
Right.
I mean, that's I think that's their position. Now I think it's wrong, 100%. These guys put in the work. They're getting out there, making YouTube videos and being on Twitch and making podcasts. That's pretty hard work. I think most people who don't do it don't understand it. They just basically think you're talking on the phone. There's a lot of things that go into that. There's a lot of equipment involved. It's not a cheap process. If you want to get quality microphones and have a good computer and have good editing software and having good streaming software and having good recording software, that costs money, and that can run a decent amount of change for a quality setup, not like some bullshit setup. You know what I mean? So it's bad form for the WWE. It gives AEW a unique opportunity where it's like, guys, go out and do it. Go out and go on Twitch, go on Cameo, go do it. When the contracts expire, it gives the AEW some unique leverage. It's like, hey, listen, come here to AEW, and you can do your Twitch and you can do your YouTube and you can do your podcast, no problem. So I think it paints the WWE in a corner that they don't need to be in. Just be like, oh, who cares? Well, as long as you're not being reckless, you're not doing anything to get us in trouble.
Right.
Then we're fine. Keep it PG, you're all right.
Well, I will say this. When I was looking into the Jesse Ventura kind of background and what happened, I was trying to think of a comparative to today. Okay, so for example, Predator, Running Man. Okay, out of the gate, kaboom, boom, boom. Right, great. Great roles.
Don't forget that Jesse had to quit to do Predator.
Right. So he made the right move. Then you go down the line and it starts to kind of tail off, and you have Thunderground, which, if you don't know what Thunderground is, it's two hobos traveling the country to go to this mythical fight against the Man.
That movie's dope, by the way.
Oh, I watched it. It's not dope. And the final fight scene, so good they don't show us the finale. Are you kidding me? Anyway,
did you miss out on the TV pilot? that Jesse did? Tag team with Roddy Piper?
No, I saw that a long time. You sent me that a long time ago. That was
Yeah.
actually fun.
Like that show would have been a hit like 4 years earlier.
Yes.
If you put that like near next to Knight Rider and A Team, like tag team would have done some business. I
Like
think. I think that
85,
would have picked up.
86, that comes
Yeah,
out.
100%.
He was in a movie called Abraxas, which I watched the whole thing. I want my time back. But it was interesting because I always feel that, a lot of times it's the roles the people pick that helps make them. He was in some small parts. Of course, Major League 2, Batman and Robin, small parts.
Demolition Man.
And, I think he chose pretty well for him. But I think...
Demolition Man got Sylvester Stallone on WCW Saturday Night.
Right. And I think that, compared to today, okay, so you say, well, Sasha Banks is a Mandalorian. That's a high-profile Disney show, money ahoy, and it's like a foot in the door. Now, I don't know how she got that role. I don't know who she knew or like whatever happened, but that's cool. And I hope she does well. I hope I don't watch it and go, oh, she jumps across the screen and like falls on her head.
They put her in the trailer, so she has to be someone important.
I'm thinking that too, and I'm also thinking that's like holy crap, it's Sasha Banks, good for her. So I think about that, and then you look at like, okay, let's fast forward to today, and we have like Miro is in AEW, and he's doing his show still, but he's interweaving that side of it with the storyline. There's a rumor going around that they're going to use the Bachelor Party to debut the AEW video game, which would be pretty damn cool. I mean, it's a good again.
I don't trust it, and here's why. When TNA came out with their video game, AJ Styles said it's going to be the best video game ever. Samoa Joe was like, "This game is going to be awesome." We've played it. We're involved in. They alluded to the fact that they're involved with the development of the game. They're comparing it to fucking No Mercy and shit. And when we get fucking TNA Impact, that game is dog shit. I know some people like it, but it's dog shit. So the fact that Kenny Omega is involved, and this can go bad. This can go really bad.
It could, but don't you think it also offers a possibility that you have people who are in this, who are huge fans of the gaming industry, will give you a better edge than someone who's just an executive who's going to like nod? I really feel that they're doing a lot to get things right.
It depends. Again, it depends who develops the game. If they get like if they get a AAA studio to do this, you gotta look at EA. I guess it would be the first one to look at it.
But could you see them doing something where they have fans get a chance to play alongside, the wrestlers?
Yeah, absolutely. That'd be dope. You can do that online. You don't have to leave your house. Because I think they did that promotion with AJ Styles, where I think you get to play against AJ Styles, and if you beat him, you win a prize. So I think they did that with 2K18. I believe that was the deal. So it's been done, and I think it'd be a good moment to put out this game because there's no WWE game for this year.
Looking at that big picture of these guys and women are independent contractors, quote unquote, and they're doing their own thing to promote themselves as a product. I keep thinking of like Creed and Up, Up, Down, Down. What's going to happen there? Now, I always think of...
I want to say their stuff is officially approved.
Yeah.
I think their podcast and that show is officially approved.
I mean, I'll just say that I really hope that we see some kind of resolution, because I do think the smart thing to do for some of these people might be to walk away and say, well, I'll take 6 months off. I'll go to AEW, with a better platform. I really feel that, when you look at what happened to Jesse Ventura, and what's happening now, it's really a lesson for the guys now to go, okay, what are we looking at? What can we do to avoid this mess? Or find something that's going to be so lucrative that you don't need to, screw it, I'm leaving.
When it comes to wrestlers in general, I mean, I hope they get, their contract situation resolved. I hope they do form a union, for Christ's sakes. They definitely need one at this point. The WWE has been the heel, right? They've been the top heel of the company for 20 years at this point. Right. So any kind of shenanigans or tomfoolery that they do, the fans kind of just let it slide. Would it be Saudi Arabia or, some of the COVID issues they've had? So, the fans, this is par for the course for the WWE. It's an indictment of society as a whole, where we've become completely tribalistic and kind of beholden to these giant corporations. And we see it in everything. Would it be toy companies, movie companies, It doesn't matter what the company is. I have a loyalty to the company and to the brand, and maybe not for the people who work for them. So it's a sad state of affairs. You can't criticize the WWE or AEW without having yourself attacked by fanboys left and right. Just like you can't criticize Marvel or DC or PlayStation and Xbox, and you're always going to have their fanboys coming with pitchforks and torches at you. And I think it's just that's a sad state of affairs, and something that hopefully will change in the next couple of years. I'm not necessarily holding my breath for that, but what are you going to do there? All right, guys. So catch us on the next episode of Retro Wrestling Games Presents. We're going to talk about SmackDown, Just Bring It for the PlayStation 2, or more accurately, Exciting Pro Wrestling 3, because we got the Japanese version. And we're going to pose the question, can a company that makes a video game bootleg their own game? We'll find out on the very next episode of Retro Wrestling Games Presents. So for Matt Riley, I'm Alex G. Have a good night.